MJ, Assistant Professor, Department of Electrical and Electronics Engineering, Government Engineering College, Barton Hill. He graduated in Electrical and Electronics Engineering from College of Engineering, Trivandrum, obtained his postgraduate in Power Electronics from IIT Mumbai. Mr. Vishal has a 6 years industrial experience with ABB Limited and Bharat Heavy Electrical Limited. He has an academic experience of 7 years with different government engineering colleges of Wayanad, Idiki, College of Engineering, Trivandrum, and Barton Hill. We are really glad to have him for today's session. On behalf of ASAP and ASDC Division, I welcome you, sir, to deliver today's class. And on this note, I would like to welcome all the attendees to the session. Let me conclude this introductory part by giving the outline of today's class. The entire 1 hour will be divided into 2 continuous sessions, and each session will have 20 minutes of lecture and 10 minutes of question and answer interaction respectively. And during the interaction time, students may use question and answer chat window by clicking the raise hand icon near to your name. All the students are requested to maintain a classroom decorum throughout the session. Vishal sir, you may please start the session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, let's start. Good afternoon to everyone. Now in this approximately 40-minute session, we will discuss on the introduction to synchronous motor drives, and we will be having a very brief introduction to synchronous motor drives, and we will discuss the salient features of a synchronous motor drive with special emphasis on those features which are unique to a synchronous machine, which means which a DC machine or an induction machine cannot do. Some of these a synchronous motor can definitely do. So we will be giving special emphasis to that. Towards the end of this lecture, we will move on to the torque and power equation, and then we will try to plot the T omega or torque speed characteristics of this machine. To save some bandwidth, I am removing my video. Yeah, let's get started. See, salient features of a synchronous motor drive. A synchronous motor is ideally suited. It's not that it cannot be used for low power. Definitely it can be, but a very special niche of synchronous motor drives is in high power drives of the order of several megawatts of power. If you ask me whether a induction machine cannot do, definitely induction machine also can operate at such high powers, but then there are some serious drawbacks, which we will see in a short while from now. How about a DC machine? Can a DC machine be rated for high power? In practical scenario, you will not find a DC machine of such high capacity. Not just that, you will not find a DC machine of, say, more than 400 volt or something. The reason is that as the DC voltage rating increases, the voltage between the commutator segments also rises. Now this gives rise to insulation issues, and then we will have to increase the space between the commutator segments. This will increase the diameter of the commutators, it would increase the rating of the brushes, it would increase the cross-sectional area of the rotor as well as stator. The machine becomes unnecessarily bulky. So that is the reason why you will not see a high-power DC machine normally. Exceptions are there. Traction motors, there are some DC series motors which are used as traction motors. They are rated for several thousand kilowatts. So that exception is there. Other than that, you will not find a normal DC machine for such high powers. How about induction machine? As I already told, they can do. There are definitely induction machines of the ratings of having a few megawatts, but then they have some serious drawbacks, which we will see in the next slide. And what other advantages? So synchronous machines can very well be used for high power drives. There are some unique features of a synchronous machine which makes them ideal for such high power applications. Other than that, you might be knowing that synchronous of all the conventional machines, what we have learned, a synchronous machine has the highest possible efficiency. What is the reason for that? Induction machine definitely has slip losses. That is, since the rotor and the stator are running, the arm and the rotor are running at different speeds, we have something called a slip. And this slip causes slip losses in the form of rotor copper loss. What happens in a synchronous machine? These slip losses are absent, and therefore, despite having similar stator structure, a synchronous motor is a better efficiency machine compared to a synchronous motor. You can further improve the efficiency. You look at point number 3. high efficiency drives, PMSM and BLDC. PM is nothing but permanent magnet synchronous motor. If you replace the rotor of a conventional synchronous motor with a permanent magnet, in conventional motor it is electromagnet. If you replace it with a permanent magnet, you can reduce the, or in fact you can nullify the excitation losses as well, which means of all the machines known, PMSM has the highest efficiency possible. And BLDC, at least some of you may be knowing, brushless DC motors, these are not actually DC motors, they are actually synchronous motors. Why the name BLDC, we will discuss later. If you have some doubt, you can ask in the interaction session, I will answer that. But for those who know that, understand, though we call it BLDC, it is not a DC machine. It is internally it is a synchronous motor itself. Then this application, servo application, which having high torque and weight ratio, is not of our interest. Why? Because these servo drives are not proper power electronic drives. In power electronics, we deal with switches, devices which will operate only in saturation or cutoff, whereas servo application drives require those transistors to be operated in their active region. So they are not switches, to be honest. They are operating in their active region. So such drives are beyond the scope of this lecture. So I am not going into the detail of that. One another important advantage of using synchronous motor is that, point number 2, we can use thyristor switches in load commutated inverter. Normally in our voltage source converters, inverters or current source inverters, we normally do not use thyristors. The reason being that if thyristors are used, we need to have force commutation circuitry. And for that reason, thyristors are not preferred to be used with inverters. But understand, of all the power semiconductor devices known to man, thyristors have the best reliability and power handling capability. Even today, high voltage DC transmission, which handles megawatts and gigawatts of power, they still use thyristors. It shows the reliability of that device. It is a very mature technology, several decades of trustworthy service, and hence if thyristor can be used, that is the best device to use. But in inverters, since they need force commutation, they are not used. But as a special case, if you are using load commutated inverter, which means the load commutation, it is not force commutation. The load current itself will commutate the thyristors. Such applications, we can use thyristor switches in inverter. And definitely, synchronous motor can do that. How it can do that? That also we will see in this lecture. Okay. So I have just told the overview. First 2 points are of special importance because these 2 are unique features of synchronous motor drives. To understand the problem with the induction machine for high power applications, let's consider these 2 circuits. We will go back to the basics of network analysis. Consider 2 coils, 2 solenoids excited by voltage V1, which draws a current I1. 2 iron pieces are placed inside the solenoid of same cross-sectional area. It produces flux Phi1. Similarly, another voltage source V2 excites another coil of same cross-sectional area, which draws current I2 and produces flux Phi2. The only difference between these 2 is that the air gap length in this one is only 1 mm, whereas air gap length in this one, the second case, is 2 mm, twice that of the first one. Now, can at least those who are basics are strong would tell what is the relation between Phi1 and Phi2 if I say that V1 and V2 are exactly the same. If V1 and V2 are exactly the same, what is the relation between Phi1 and Phi2? Remember, Phi1 is in the path where air gap is 1 mm, Phi2 is in the path where air gap length is 2 mm. If your answer is that Phi1 will be more because the air gap length is less, then you are wrong. Because at least 6th semester students should not say that, because now you are learning electromagnetic theory, and what does Faraday's law say? The flux in the air gap, or flux in general, is decided only by the excitation voltage. The air gap length has no role to play in that, which means if V1 is 10 volt and if the flux in the air gap is 10 milliwebers, if I apply the same 10 volt here, irrespective of the length here, it will be 10 milliweber. The flux will be 10 milliwebers. If it is 2 mm, it will be 10 milliweber. If it is 10 mm, it will be 10 milliweber. Even if it is a 1 kilometer air gap, such hypothetically long air gap, still the flux should be 10 milliweber. That's what Faraday's laws say, and that is sacrosanct. We cannot violate that. Which means 10 volt produces 10 milliweber here. The same 10 volt will produce 10 milliweber here as well. So that contradicts our view. See, only 1 mm air gap here, but here is 2. Still, how is the flux same? That's because the current drawn by this one, the Faraday's law sets the value of the flux, and to set up that much value of flux, the current drawn by the machine will change. If 1 ampere is drawn by this one, this circuit will draw 2 amperes. If it is 10 mm, it will be 10 ampere. If it is 1 kilometer, it will be 1 million amperes, like that. So the magnetizing current can change, but the value of the flux will remain constant, and that is independent of the air gap length, and that is decided only by the value of the excitation voltage. Okay, and this is not new to you. I am sure you would have learned in induction machine V by F control. Why were we keeping V by F ratio constant? That was to keep the air gap flux at its rated value. Okay, so flux depends on V by F, and if V and F are same, then the flux also will remain same. The only parameter that will change is the magnetizing current. Now we have one more. What is the takeaway from this discussion? As the air gap length increases, the magnetizing current also will increase. Now how is it going to affect our induction machine? Before we do that, can DC excitation produce flux? Just now we have seen in induction machine as that the flux is proportional to V by F, voltage by frequency. For a DC, frequency is 0 Hertz. So can a DC excitation produce flux? I hope all of you knows this answer. If anyone doesn't know, you can post it as a question here. In the final interaction time of 10 minutes, I will try to explain this. If you already know, there is no point in me discussing it once again. So if you have a doubt, please raise it as a question. So just for the interest of finishing this lecture on time, I am not going to explain this now. But however, if you have doubt, I am happy to explain that. Okay. So if you have, just post it as a question. Now moving on to induction motor for high power applications. What happens if we design an induction machine for high power? Say let it be 5 megawatts of power, 5 megawatts. Where do we see such high capacity machines? If you are, I don't know whether you have visited any thermal power plant, but if you visit that, there are 2 gigantic fans which are used. One is called induced drought fan, ID fan, that is used to suck in air from the atmosphere and pass it on to the boiler where the coal is getting burnt. Air is needed for the combustion, and for that huge amount of air is needed. And this fan sucks in air from the atmosphere and put it. The rating is usually about 3 to 5 megawatts. Similarly, there is another fan called forced drought fan, FD fan. That is also that is used to suck out once the combustion is over. A lot of smoke will be there. This smoke has to be taken out and passed on to through chimney. For that, we use another fan called the FD fan, forced drought fan. This is also of the order of few megawatts. In reality, they will be synchronous machines, but certain power plants uses induction machine as well. But then, if I make such large capacity induction machine, what is the problem we face? For high power applications, the size of the rotor will definitely be increased because it has to take in more current or more voltage. In general, it has to handle much more amount of power, which means the stator will be large, the rotor will be large, the shaft will be large. So the size of the motor will be of enormous proportions. What happens if we have such a large rotor circuit? Due to its own weight, it may sag. The shaft may sag a little bit. Now, what is wrong in that? Because a typical air gap length of an induction machine is typically of the order of half a mm, 0.3 to 0.6 mm for a typical machine. So, if the shaft sags by at least 1 mm, what will happen? While running, the rotor and stator will foul with each other, will rub against each other. What is the solution? Why did it rub? Fundamentally because we are designing an induction machine for high power applications. High power applications require huge rotor and stator. Since the rotor is too much, it will cause minor sagging, small amount of sagging. But that small amount of sagging itself will create trouble for an induction machine because the air gap is very small, half an mm, or of the order of half an mm. So what is the solution? Increase the air gap. But is that a proper solution to use? That's the question. Just now we have seen, as the air gap length increases, the magnetizing current also increases. Now let's visit some machine basics. Consider an induction machine, rated current is 100 ampere. What would be the no load current, or what would be the magnetizing current of such a machine? If the full load capacity is 100, then the no load itself would be 35 to 40 amperes. So with such small air gaps, still the induction machine draws some 40 amperes as no load current itself. The full load current itself is only 100, of which 40% goes as no load current. This is the problem with induction machine. Now that is with 0.3 mm gap. Now I am telling about cases where we increase the air gap to 1 mm or 2 mm to prevent this rubbing. What will happen? Consider a high capacity machine which output current is 1000 ampere. For a 1000 ampere machine, the no load current itself will become somewhere around 600 or 700 amperes. Can you think of such? Is that a good design? 1000 ampere is the rated value, of which 700 goes as the no load current. Useful power is substantially less. That cannot be seen as a very good design. So hope you understood why an induction machine cannot be made. It's not that cannot be made. It is a good design of induction machine for high power applications is nearly impossible. That is because of the huge amount of magnetizing current it draws. Hope the concept is clear. To explain this only, I explained the relevance of magnetizing current and air gap flux and stuff like that. If you have doubt, please feel free to ask. I will be happy to clear them in the discussion session. Tell me.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
sir.
Yes.
Ms. Harita have asked a question about explain BLDC motor.
Yeah. Okay. Shall I do it now or?
Your wish, sir.
Yeah. Okay. I will do it right away. See, BLDC is brushless DC motor. Actually, it is not a DC motor. It is a permanent magnet synchronous motor. When you buy a BLDC, what you get is that you get a PMSM motor, permanent magnet synchronous motor, connected to a voltage source inverter, a 3-leg, 3-phase voltage source inverter. What you see outside, what you connect, any machine needs input, and the input for a BLDC is the DC link of the inverter. That's why. So as a layman, when he sees two terminals. One is positive, one is negative, where he connects the DC. That's why it is called a DC motor. It's not actually, internally it is not a DC motor. It is actually a permanent magnet synchronous motor. And you are connecting the DC not to the motor, but it is to the DC link of the inverter. Using the power given to the DC link of the inverter generates AC. And that AC will run the synchronous motor. Hope the concept is clear.
I hope so, sir. So you may please continue.
Yeah. So just we have seen the limitation of induction machine. It cannot be designed for large power applications. If we design it, then huge amount of total power goes waste as magnetizing current. Hope the concept is clear. Now, what is the advantage of synchronous machine if you use for large power applications? What is the peculiarity of a synchronous motor? We will discuss it just now. We have 5 more minutes before we end the first session. We will discuss that. See, who decides the flux in the air gap? It is the voltage and based on the Faraday's law. For example, if the stator of the machine is rated for 400 volt 50 hertz, 400 volt 50 hertz, let the flux in the air gap be 50 milliwebers. I'm just arbitrarily saying some numbers. 50 milliwebers is the rated flux, which means the Faraday's law has decided that a 400 volt 50 hertz machine will have 50 milliwebers of flux in the air gap. Remember this in mind. Now it doesn't matter whether the machine is of a synchronous machine or induction machine. And in fact, synchronous machine as well as induction machine, the stator is exactly the same. The difference comes only in the rotor part. So in stator, what happens? The magnetizing current or the flux has to be set up by the stator because it's a singly fed machine. Only one source of excitation that is given to the stator. So flux has to be set by the stator itself. What is the difference with a synchronous motor? Synchronous motor is a doubly fed machine. We have 2 sources of excitation. One AC source is connected to the stator and one DC source is connected to the rotor. Now, the stator and rotor put together can work to set up the required magnetic flux in the air gap. Now, I am going back to the same machine. The same 400 volt 50 hertz machine will have 50 milliwebers of flux in the air gap, even if it is synchronous machine or it is induction machine. Now, I am talking about synchronous machine. Assume a case where I give the DC excitation to be 0. That is the flux produced by the rotor or the DC excitation is 0. What happens? As per Faraday's law, the flux in the air gap has to be 50, irrespective of whatever we do. The flux in the air gap has to be 50. There is no option to change it. Then what is to be done? Rotor is giving 0. Then who should give the remaining 50 milliwebers? It has to be from the stator. Now, how can the stator do that? Stator can set up flux by drawing magnetizing current. And what is the nature of this current? It is 90-degree lagging with respect to the voltage. Okay, magnetizing current is 90-degree lagging with respect to the applied voltage. Under such conditions, what will be the power factor? The power factor will be definitely lagging because magnetizing current is lagging. Clear? Now consider a second case where I increase the DC excitation to the rotor and I set up a flux of 50 milliwebers by the rotor alone. The rotor itself is giving 50 milliweber. What does Faraday's law say? Rotor or stator, I don't care. The flux in the air gap must be 50 milliweber. Now what happens? Now the rotor itself is giving 50 milliweber, and how much should the stator give? Absolutely nothing, because already 50 is there. Now what will be the current drawn by the stator? It will be in phase with the voltage, because whatever current drawn by the stator is used as the mechanical power of the motor, which means it is in watts, kilowatts or megawatts, which means voltage and current is in phase. In other way, if you say the power factor is unity. Just now we have seen a synchronous motor working with the lagging power factor. Now we have seen the same synchronous motor working with unity power factor. Now consider a third case wherein I increase the DC excitation further. What happens? Now instead of 50 milliweber, the rotor is producing 75 milliwebers of flux. What will Faraday's law say? This cannot be accepted. I need only 50 milliweber. That is sacrosanct. That cannot be changed. Now what should stator do? 50 milliweber can only be applied to the, it can be developed in the air gap flux, but the rotor is already giving 75. What should it do? It should demagnetize the air gap. How can it do demagnetize the air gap? It should generate 25 milliwebers of flux in the opposite direction. So how can it do that? It by drawing a current 90-degree leading to the applied voltage. Okay, 90-degree leading. Now the current drawn is 90-degree leading to the applied voltage. What happens now? What is the power factor? Now it is leading. Now what is the meaning of that? We have seen a synchronous machine can operate in lagging power factor. It can operate at unity power factor. It can operate at leading power factor as well. Any power factor you want, you can make the synchronous machine operate just by changing the DC excitation to the rotor. Thus, a synchronous machine can have how much ever air gap you want, 2 mm, 5 mm, 10 mm, whatever the number you say, a synchronous machine can be designed to have that much air gap. Only thing is that the DC excitation has to be given properly so that the magnetizing current drawn by the stator can be limited to possible. It can even operate at leading power factor. So this is the reason why we say a synchronous machine, see, even a synchronous machine with such high power capacity will be very large, very bulky. It can also sag. It can sag by 3 mm, 4 mm or 5 mm. Still, it's okay. Why? Because I can afford to have my air gap much more than the sagging distance. If this shaft sags by 3 mm, very well I can have my air gap to be 6 mm or 8 mm or 10 mm also. There is without worrying about the magnetizing current drawn by the synchronous motor. Hope the first, we have only discussed the first point, why synchronous machine is an ideal for high power applications. Hope the concept is clear. In a single sentence, if you tell a induction machine of high capacity will have a substantial portion of magnetizing current, which cannot be used as mechanical power. Whereas a synchronous machine, by virtue of its merit that it can operate at any power factor by changing the DC excitation, it can have large air gaps and hence can have large amount of rotor or stator weights, and hence a synchronous motor can safely be designed for 5 megawatts or even 10 megawatts. In fact, all the ID and FT fans in thermal power plants are normally made of synchronous motors only. So we have completed 20 minutes now. I am open for another 10 minutes for this question answer session. Any questions?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
So there is a question from Achyutan. The question is, can you please explain about the sensorless BLDC motor?
Yeah, actually, sensorless BLDC motor is a little complex concept that doesn't come into the purview of this course, E308. This is a basic drives course, but Mr. Achudan can find hundreds of resources online for doing this sensorless control. Basically, what happens is that I will just say in a brief manner what is the importance of sensor. Towards the end of this semester or this module, you will find what is sensorless control. Sensor is an integral part of this BLDC motor as well as PMSM motor, because sensor is the one which is giving the position of the rotor excitation. We cannot open the motor and see where is the rotor currently now. We use sensors to predict what is the position of the rotor. Based on the position of the rotor, we ask our inverter to synthesize a voltage which is at a certain angle and certain magnitude to do certain work. So it is absolutely important to obtain the correct position of the rotor. That is what is called sensor. With sensor, we are doing that. However, sensor is a very fragile element. If it fails, it is not a good design if the machine also fails. That has led to the design of sensorless control of BLDC, PMSM, and all such drives. Okay, so by removing sensor, we estimate there is no more sensor is no longer there, but we, based on the excitation voltage, the magnitude of the excitation voltage, we use certain algorithms to predict where will be the rotor field now. Based on that, we obtain the torque angle delta. Based on torque angle delta, we reverse calculate the voltage to be impressed upon the stator terminals. That is the basis of sensorless control. This is just a very basic explanation. More details you can find from Google or any other online sources. But I cannot explain it more than this because this is definitely beyond the scope of this course. Anything else?
There is one more question. Can DC excitation produce flux?
Yeah, it definitely. Yeah, okay. I will explain that. Yeah. See, we have just now told that flux is proportional to V by F. So for a DC, F is 0. So we assume that flux should be infinity. Is it really so? That we will see. Please pardon me with my drawing. I am using my pointing device to draw it, so it may not be as neat as we draw it on paper and pen. So please bear with me. The question is, let it be V. There are n number of turns. It produces a flux phi. The coil produces a flux phi. Can it produce flux or not is the question. So what does Faraday's law say? V is equal to N d phi by dt. Okay. So if let's give some numbers. Let V be 10 volt. Okay. So what does d phi by dt indicate? D phi by dt is equal to 10 by n. 10 is a positive constant. N is also a constant, positive constant, which is the number of turns of this solenoid. So d phi by dt is positive. Rate of change of flux is positive. What does it mean? Flux continuously increases, which means what is the steady state value of this flux? As t tends to infinity, flux also tends to infinity, which means the steady state flux is infinity. This is what we get when we divide V by F. V by 0 is equal to infinity. So, but this is not, in reality, this is not possible. So, where are we going wrong? Let me erase this. Okay. Actually, we will connect a resistor in series with an inductor. Even if you do not connect it externally, the resistance of the wire, the internal resistance of this inductance, the internal resistance of this voltage source, everything is into a lumped model called R. Now we have R and an inductor L. So what is the equation? Your equation is given by IR plus the voltage across the inductor VL. And this is the one which is producing flux. Now let's come back to the What is the nature of this inductor L? Under steady state, it is a short circuit, and in transient, exactly at this moment, at the instant of closing the switch in the circuit, this becomes an open circuit. When it is an open circuit, the entire 10 volts come across this VL. Current through the circuit is 0 at that time. So what is the rate at which the flux rises? Excitation voltage divided by N. Excitation voltage is, the slope is given by 10 by N. This is the y-axis is flux. After some time, what happens? Now the current begins to rise. So some voltage gets dropped across the resistor. Let's say after some time, 5 volt gets dropped across resistance and balance 5 comes to inductance. Now what is the rate of change of flux? It will be 5 by N. The slope has reduced, but it is still increasing. The slope at this section is 5 by N. After some time, what happens? Let it be 8 volt comes across the resistor and only 2 volt comes there. So this is, the slope is 2 by N. And after steady state has been attained, entire 10 volt drops across the resistor and the voltage across the inductor is 0. At that time, flux becomes a constant. And a steady state. This is the steady state value. This is the steady state value of the flux. So definitely, DC excitation can produce flux. Frequency is not an important parameter to produce flux. And this is how a DC excitation works. Without a resistor, which is an idealistic case, the flux will rise to infinity. But with a resistor, flux will be limited to a steady state quantity. Is the concept clear? Any more doubts? Any more questions?
There is one more question.
Yes.
Alex David had the question is from Alex David, and the question is importance of torque angle.
Yeah, I am coming to it. We will discuss in the next portion of the lecture.
Okay, so that's all.
Okay. Now let's go ahead. Now this is the equivalent circuit of a synchronous motor. One assumption is made that the stator resistance is negligible and hence it has been ignored. If you do not ignore that, then R also will come in series with the synchronous reactance XS. Okay. Now there is a voltage, supply voltage, excitation voltage, and current IS. This is a stator current. That's why we are giving the subscript S. Now remember, this is all these are not symbol terms, they are complex terms, which means it has a real part as well as imaginary part. So here we have taken V angle 0, EF angle delta, and just now someone has asked, this delta is the torque angle. What is delta? We will see in the few slides, but understand, only if there is a difference between this angle 0 and minus delta, then the current will flow. You would be familiar in your power systems course that real power or real power flows from a higher delta to a lower delta. Now, since our reference is the applied supply voltage V angle 0, obviously this EF excitation voltage angle has to be minus. Otherwise, power will not flow from the grid to the motor. Since it is a motor, power has to be taken from the grid to the motor, which means the current has to flow from left to right. For current to flow from left to right, this angle must be at a higher angle than this one. Since it is already 0, definitely this angle has to be minus delta. Okay. Now the expression is given as V. Just write the Kirchhoff's voltage law. V is given by the excitation voltage plus IS into XS. Remember, the arrow on the top indicates that they are not simple algebraic sum, they are vector sums. Okay. Now this is the phasor diagram of this one, which is very familiar to you. You would have done right from your first year onward. You would have drawn this waveform. I'm not wasting my time on this. If you have doubt, you are free to raise it. At the last 10 minutes, we will discuss this. If someone is not clear with how it is done, I will do that. Yeah. Now we have seen the equivalent circuit. Before then we will try to explain the concept of torque angle delta. Before that, we need to understand what is the rotating magnetic field. Before we go to that, the second advantage what we have seen, what we have shown in the first slide is that we can use a thyristor switches S1, S2, S3 and S4 are thyristors in the inverter if it is load commutated. Now, not just see what for this one to work. I have already explained thyristors are not used for inverters normally because they require force commutation circuitry. But then how can I use it for synchronous motor is what I am going to explain now. See, by virtue of its property, a synchronous motor can operate at leading power factor, which means the current becomes zero before the voltage does. See, current becomes zero at X, and after X, after some time only, the voltage becomes zero. Similarly, the current becomes zero here. After some time, voltage also becomes zero. The current is leading the voltage, which means the synchronous motor is now operating at the leading power factor. And only the synchronous motor, induction machine cannot operate. Only the synchronous motor can operate at leading power factor. So under such conditions, we can use these devices, thyristors for inverter. How does it work? Assume, see, point A and point B is marked here, and I have taken my positive direction of current as from left to right, from A to B, from left to right. You can see the arrow mark here. Now, assume I am talking about zero in the positive half cycle. Positive half cycle means the power flows from the battery through S1 D1 combination, induction machine, synchronous motor, then S4 D4 combination, and back to the supply, which is a battery, since it is an inverter. Now, the question is that from 0 to X, this portion, 0 to X, current is positive. What does it mean? It's in the positive half cycle. So, either of these two devices and these two devices are conducting. Current is positive. What does it mean? Current is flowing from A to B or from left to right. If that is the case, current is flowing like this, from the battery like this and back to the battery. If that is the case, which of these two devices will conduct? Current is flowing like this, from top to down. Only thyristor can allow current in such a manner. Why? Because since the diode is like this, it can allow current from A to this manner only. But it cannot allow current to flow from top to down. Hence, it is the S1 which is conducting. Similarly, here S4 is conducting. That's what I have written in this interval. First interval, S and S4 is conducting. Clear? Now the current has become zero. Current has become zero. What happens now to the thyristors? S1 and S4 was carrying current. Now the current through them has become zero. When the current through a thyristor becomes less than the holding current, what happens to thyristor? They will turn off. S1 and S4 gets turned off at X, and then the current reverses. Current becomes negative. What does it mean? Current now flows from B to A, from right to left. Right to left. So which devices will conduct? From bottom upward. Only diode can conduct. Thyristor will not allow current flow in that direction. So now D1 conducts, similarly D4 conducts. That's what is given here. In this interval, D1 and D4 conducts. D1 and D4 conducts in this interval. S1 and S4 conducts in the earlier interval. Similar thing repeats in the negative half cycle. Now our interest is point X and point Y. What is the peculiarity of point X? The current through the thyristor becomes zero, which means the thyristor turns off automatically without any force commutation circuitry. The load current I itself is commutating S1 and S4 in the positive half cycle, and at point Y it will commutate S2 and S3 in the negative half cycle, which means we do not need any external force commutation circuitry. The current itself will commutate. The load current itself will commutate the thyristors, and hence the name load commutated inverter, LCI, load commutated inverter. And for this circuit to work, what is the only condition to be satisfied? The power factor has to be leading. The current should reach zero before the voltage does, and that is possible only with a synchronous motor. Hope the concept is clear. Now coming back to RMF, this you would have learned several times, and also in induction machine in the previous module you would have learned it. I will just very briefly explain this. The stator, I am showing the stator. The stator of a synchronous motor is same as the stator of an induction motor. Now, what happens is that I have drawn concentrated windings, but just understand the concept. A prime are the two conductors of, there are three phases A, B and C. So phase A coil is marked like this. A dot current, that is a dot current at A and a cross current at A prime. For a current flowing in that manner, the flux produced by this coil A prime is phi A, marked in this red color. That is one set of coil. Similarly, next set of coil B prime. B is displaced from A. B is displaced by 120 degree. See, conductor B is displaced from conductor A by 120 degree. Similarly, B prime is displaced from A prime by 120 degree. So this is the next set of coil B prime, and the flux produced by this coil will be in this direction, phi B. Similarly, the third set would be C prime. C is displaced at an angle 120 degree from 120 degree from B. Similarly, C prime is displaced at an angle 120 degree. So we have three coils displaced in space by 120 degree. This term is very important. The space is very important. It is displaced in space by 120 degree. So when I say coils are displaced, actually a coil comprises a number of conductors. They are distributed windings. In this circuit, I have drawn it as concentrated. When I say they are displaced, what I mean is that their magnetic axis, which is this one, and this one, they are displaced by 120 degree. That's what I mean when they are displaced by 120 degree. So these three coils must be there. They must be displaced in space by 120 degree. Not just that, these coils must be excited by currents which are displaced in time by 120 degree. So we have space and time here. Space in coil, time, and what we call the current, this kind of a current, three currents which are displaced in time by 120 degree, they are called three-phase currents. That's how when you excite a stator of a induction machine or three-phase currents, it will set up uniform magnetic field, a rotating magnetic field. What is the features of a uniform RMF? It has a constant amplitude and it rotates at a constant speed determined by the stator frequency. Okay, for these conditions to be satisfied, these both are needed. The coils must be displaced in space by 120 degree, and the excitation currents must be displaced in time by 120 degree. These two are must. Many students skip this portion. They skip this, but actually this is very important. If they are not displaced in space by 120 degree, then you will not get a uniform rotating magnetic field. Okay, uniform RMF will not be there. You can get non-uniform RMF, agreed, but uniform RMF will not be available if the coils are not displaced in space by 120 degree. Hope the concept is clear. Now, this is I am explaining the working principle. Now, once an RMF is set up, I am going back to the slide. Once the RMF is set up, what happens to the stator? The stator becomes like a rotating magnet. Actually, it will not physically rotate. There is a magnetic flux which rotates at a speed given by omega s. That is marked here. It rotates at a speed given by omega s, which is the synchronous speed. And you have a north pole and you have a south pole. I am in this diagram. I am shown only a two-pole machine. That's why we have two poles. They rotate at a speed. In this snapshot, I have taken anti-clockwise. Okay, you can take it clockwise as well. No issues. So there is a RMF setup in the stator which rotates in anti-clockwise direction at a constant speed given by synchronous speed. Now we have a rotor which is an electromagnet. When an excitation is given, this iron piece becomes a magnet which has a north pole at one end and south pole at another end. Under steady state, once the steady state is attained, the speed of the stator as well as speed of the rotor both are equal. Omega s is equal to omega r. Okay, that is when we say the steady state has been attained. Under steady state, this is the stator flux. Fs, stator flux, and let this be rotor flux, Fr. The angle between them is called the torque angle delta. The torque angle delta. This is the angle, torque angle delta. What is the physical significance of delta? I will explain very shortly. Now, since I am talking about synchronous motor, that's why I call it torque angle. If I am talking about a alternator, a synchronous generator, then this torque angle will take the name power angle. Okay, so since it is a power generation machine, it's a power angle. But since ours is a torque production machine, it is called torque angle. Okay. So torque angle, power angle, essentially they are saying, only difference is that in which domain they are operating. Now what happens is that this machine, you would have learned a synchronous motor is not self-starting. Why? Because the moment I apply three-phase voltages, three-phase currents to the stator, RMF is set up. Why it happens suddenly? That's because it is operating in electrical domain. Electrical time constant is of the order of few milliseconds, whereas mechanical time constant is of the order of few seconds. Now this one is in electrical domain. This one is an electrical domain, and omega r is in mechanical domain, which means their time constants are widely different. I mean, hugely spaced away from each other. Okay. What happens is that initially omega r is equal to 0. That is at standstill. But this one, the moment you apply the switch on the supply, you will have a RMF, uniform RMF rotating at say 1500 RPM. You have 1500 RPM, and your rotor is at 0 RPM. Now the relative speed is 1500 RPM, and such high speeds, the rotor, due to its inertia, cannot follow the RMF and catch up. Magnetic locking is not possible. Now what should we do? We normally place damper windings on the excuse my drawing. We place damper windings on the pole faces, whereby it starts as an induction machine. A synchronous machine starts like an induction machine. Once the speed from 0 RPM, once it starts like an induction machine, it can naturally, induction machines are self-starting, so it starts naturally. And once it reaches a speed close to this one, say 1450 RPM or something of that kind, the relative speed is only 50 RPM. At that time, I will switch on the DC excitation to the rotor. It becomes this rotating iron piece becomes a rotating magnet. And since the difference is only 50 RPM, the magnetic locking is attained. This north pole gets attracted to south pole, and this south pole gets attracted to north pole. They get magnetically locked. And once magnetically locked, this omega s becomes equal to omega r. This is the working principle of a synchronous motor. Now, what is the relevance of torque angle? When imagine there is no load at the shaft at all, absolutely no load at the shaft. What will be the angle delta? They will be exactly 0 degree. That is, the stator field and the rotor field will be co-aligned. What happens if I load the machine? If I put some mechanical load on the machine, what will happen? Sudden knee-jerk reaction would be that the rotor would decelerate. It will fall back, but due to the magnetic coupling, it will continue to rotate at synchronous speed, but with an angle in between. This is called delta. If you further load the machine, what will happen? Delta will increase. You further load, delta will further increase. And there comes a stage beyond which this the force of attraction is so weak, it cannot sustain motion. After that, it will fall out of step and the machine will stop. This is the basic principle of operation. You would have learned it in the machines course for sure. I'm just refreshing this. Is the concept clear? Now, this is important. What is the condition for torque generation? Actually, torque is proportional to stator flux, the cross product of stator flux and rotor flux. Stator flux, cross product of and rotor flux. So mathematically, it is that constant of proportionality is inserted K here. Fs, magnitude of stator flux, it's actually field, magnitude of stator field, magnitude of rotor field into sine delta, and delta is the angle between stator field and rotor field. So remember, see, they both are rotating at synchronous speed during steady state. What is the condition for constant torque? Delta must be constant. That is, if I look from FR, the Fs should be stationary. The two fields must be stationary with respect to each other. That is the condition for torque production. Now, just to revisit what you have learned in your DC machines, what is the angle between these two? What is the angle between Fs and Fr? For a DC machine, delta is equal to 90 degree. That is the best you can get. The maximum torque or the torque per ampere is maximum if for a DC machine, because delta is 90 degree. How delta is 90 degree? Because the commutator and brushes keeps the armature flux and field flux perpendicular to each other and stationary. Thus, this, as far as torque per ampere is concerned, DC machine is the best possible machine. How about synchronous machine? They also, the the rotor runs at a slip speed, but the rotor MMF runs at the synchronous speed. You can read a good textbook on that. Explanation will require some more time, so I'm not going into that. So Fs and Fr, both these fields rotate at the same speed. So this is RMF. This is not the rotor speed. This is the speed of the rotor RMF. That is also at omega s, which means they are stationary with respect to each other. This is omega s. This is omega s. The difference is 0. The relative speed is 0, which means they are stationary with respect to each other. And hence the condition for a constant torque is that they must be stationary with respect to each other, or delta must be constant. Assume that delta is not constant. I am talking about a hypothetical case where omega s is increasing. What happens? It was, let's put some numbers. Let it be 1500 RPM. Now it is increasing. It becomes 1600. Then it becomes 1700. Like that. What happens? Delta keeps on increasing. As this speed increases, this is still at 1500. Delta keeps on increasing. What happens? Fundamentally, it may feel that since delta is increasing, the torque will rise. But what happens? Since it is continuously increasing, what happens? Delta will vary from, if initial value was 30, it becomes 31, it becomes 32, it goes on, it becomes 90, it becomes 135, it becomes 180, like that. Now, if you plot that curve, K is constant, F is constant, Fr is constant, sin delta varies from 30, 31, 32, like that. It goes all the way and comes back to 30, which means the torque, if you plot, it will be a sine wave. This is the curve of torque. So average torque is how much? Average of sine is how much? It is 0. So net torque is 0 if delta does not remain constant. Hope the concept is clear. That's why we say the two fields must be stationary with respect to each other. That is the unavoidable condition to be satisfied for constant torque generation. This delta can increase from 30, it can become 60. That's fine, but it should remain at 60. That is a question. That is what I am trying to say. It should remain 60. It should not go to 61, 62 like that. Okay. If it goes like that, then the torque era will become a sine wave, and the average torque becomes the average sine, which is equal to 0. Now the same the equivalent circuit we have seen earlier. What is the angle? Angle phi is there, which is the power factor angle between voltage and current. Cos of phi will give you the power factor. So just the mathematical equation of that. Now, if you elaborate it, you can do it yourself on your book. You will find that the real part of this equation, and if you extract the real part, this j and j gets cancelled. You will get is cos phi is equal to EF sin delta by xs. And what is power? 3 times V is cos phi. So is cos phi is this much. So 3V into EF sin delta by xs. This is the very familiar equation you would have derived in your machines course. T divided by omega will give you the torque, and hence torque is given by this equation. Now we have reached time of 2:20. The scheduled time is over. So let's wind it up now, and I am open to your questions. Anyone has any questions?
There is a question from Harita.
Yes.
Why induction motor work in lagging power factor, and how synchronous motor works in leading PF?
I think I explained it already. I'll just okay. Let me do that here. Now I am talking about induction motor. Let this be the phasor diagram. Oh, I think I have exceeded it. Let me draw the phasor diagram. Let this be the voltage. Now the current drawn by the induction machine has two components. One is a magnetizing component, which is lagging magnetizing component. And then we have an active component, which is responsible for torque generation or power generation. The usual power what we get is the active power. Now, if you take the vector sum, This will be your current. What is the power factor? This is the angle. Sorry. This is the angle phi. So power factor is nothing but cos phi. And since phi is lagging the voltage, see, voltage is here, current is lagging. So your power factor will be lagging. Whereas for synchronous motor, what is the benefit you have? This IM need not be lagging. By properly giving excitation to the rotor circuit, you can even make the magnetizing current to be leading. Okay, that is, if you overexcite the machine, it becomes leading. This will be clear once I take the phasor diagram. Now see, this is the voltage phasor, and remember the equation, EF plus ISXS is V, this equation, VF, this one, your V is equal EF plus ISXS. So EF plus ISXS is equal to your voltage V. Now, if you plot, see, what if ISXS, which is a 90-degree component, it's a drop across the reactance, then what will be the shape of the current? This angle will be 90 degree. And the current will be perpendicular to this term, and hence it will be lagging. That's why a synchronous motor or an induction machine operates at a lagging power factor. Now, the same thing, if I overexcite the machine, see here the excitation is less than the terminal voltage. EF is less than V. That's why the power factor is lagging. See, this EF is much more than V. What happens? ISXS takes this kind of a shape. Perpendicular, if you draw, IS will be leading the voltage. That's why this, now here also the power factor angle is phi, but then the current is leading the voltage. So if I take the power factor, then synchronous motor will can have a leading power factor. So induction machine can operate only at lagging power factor, but a synchronous motor can operate at lagging power factor, unity power factor, as well as leading power factor. Is it clear? Hope it's clear. Any more questions?
There is one more question.
Yeah.
Is motor rated speed rated in terms of RMF speed or in terms of rotor speed?
Yeah, if it is a synchronous motor, RMF speed as well as rotor speed both are same. Otherwise, we do not see, if you are talking about induction machine, the speed will not be 1500. It will be somewhere around 1440. Then we can understand that the RMF is if you take 50 hertz excitation, your synchronous speed will come to 1500. An induction machine will never operate at synchronous speed. If it operates at a synchronous speed, then the torque production will become equal to 0. So it can only operate at some slip. So whatever value is mentioned there is definitely not the RMF speed. It is the rated speed. It is the speed of the rotor. But for a synchronous motor, stator speed as well as rotor speed both are same. Anything else?
So there is one more question. When
Yes.
delta increases, is motor will be turned off?
Delta increases, yes, I will explain that. Yeah. Now consider the portion of a stator. Your north pole of the RMF is somewhere here. This is your rotor. North pole, south pole. They are magnetically locked. Delta is 0 now. Now you increase the torque on the machine. You increase the torque on the machine. What happens is that the pole will shift to this side. Let me erase it and draw. It becomes like this. The south pole will be here. There is an attraction between them, but the angle has shifted. This is delta. This is delta. Now what happens if delta becomes 90 degree? South pole is here. Here there is a north pole on the stator. There is a south pole at the opposite end. Now there is a confusion. should it repel or should it attract? Here there is a north and south pole. Here there is a south and south pole, equally spaced between each other. So at this, beyond this point, the system becomes unstable. That's why we call it falling out of synchronism. The magnetic locking is lost once it reaches 90. It's actually not 90. It's well below 90. It will be lost. But theoretically, the delta can go up to 90 degree. Beyond 90 degree, then attraction and repulsion becomes equal, and the net force gets cancelled. Is it clear? Anyone else? Any more questions?
Harita has asked about can you suggest few good textbook for a machine and drives?
Yeah, Alexander Langsdorff. Actually, that book was written somewhere in 1928. Still, that I consider that as the gold standard for electrical machines. Even MG says also a good book. I think these two are actually ഇത് കുറെ സ്റ്റാൻഡേർഡ് കൂടിയ ബുക്കാണ്, ഞാൻ അല്ലാന്ന് പറയില്ല. പക്ഷെ അത് വായിച്ച് മനസ്സിലാക്കാമെങ്കിൽ that's the best a student can get. Anyone else?
Sinusoidal character of torque. The question is from Subin Babu.
Okay. Let me go back. Now see, torque is proportional to sine delta. Okay. When will torque remain constant? Only when delta remains constant. If delta varies from 0 to 360 degree, what will be the nature of torque? Torque will also vary. It will be something like this. This is delta. This is 360 degree. Then torque will be something like this. Torque will take the shape of a sine wave because you have sine here. So half the duration torque is positive, remaining half torque is negative. What is the net torque? It will be 0. That's why we said sine delta has to remain a constant for constant torque production. If delta continuously varies, then T will be 0. This precisely is the reason why the starting torque of a synchronous machine is equal to 0, because the rotor is standstill and the stator continues to rotate across it at synchronous speed, which means delta varies from 0 to 360 degree, 0 to 360 degree, again 0 to 360 degree, which means it experiences definitely a torque, but the torque is equal and opposite, and hence it cancels out. Hope it's clear. For students who are not satisfied with the answer, you are free to contact me on my email. I will be happy to explain. Anyone else?
That's all, sir. The other questions will be sent to you, so
Okay.
you can answer to them, and then we'll be uploading the question and answers along with the video.
All right.
Okay, sir. And thank you so much, sir, for
Yeah.
having us. And thank you all the attendees for attending this session. Thank you all.
Can I leave the conference now or?
Sure, sir. You can.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, students.